Hey dude, how's it going? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to do two things. One, we're going to unveil the winner of the competition we ran 2 weeks ago to win a commission, one of the minis from my giveaway pool, painted by me in a color scheme of your choice. And two, we're going to show you how to paint a 1000 Suns mini. For this, we used the Infernal Master, and this was a giveaway over on Twitch. And if you would like to get the chance of winning more minis, then why don't you come and join in? Links, as always, in the video description below. For this mini, I used a large number of steps that I don't normally do when it comes to painting minis, and this was quite a fun experience for me. I also learned a few things along the way. Most notably, when painting this guy, attach the screamers to the swirly thing, but don't attach that to the rest of the mini till you're ready to work on that, because that was the devil's own to paint. So much regret. So the news that some of you will be waiting for: who won the mini and what are we painting? Well, there were 90 comments on the video that were related to people choosing a specific mini. The winner, chosen by random number generator over on Google, was number 55, which, according to my YouTube studio, the 55th comment on there was Big Brom 2270, and he has chosen the Ariman miniature. So it looks like we're painting some more 1000 Suns. So thank you for watching. Thank you very much for interacting with the video. You guys absolutely rock. Now, just one thing before we get into the video. If you guys would like to pick up some dice, head on over to mohawkminiatures.com. Maybe you want to get some Dusty Boys dice to go with your 1000 Suns, or you just want to go and check out the other copyright appropriate but lore thematic dice names that we have. Let's get to it. Alright, so we're going to kick this off the same way we did in our last video. We're taking some Liquitex white ink, Flow Improver and water in a 1:2:1 ratio to avoid speckling. We want our pre-shade to be super smooth. It might look very bright, but when you compare it to something that is actually white, you'll see it is still lots of grey. We're then taking some more inks, this time Liquitex Deep Violet, which is a beautiful purple colour, and we're taking advantage of its transparent nature to get some good shades and highlights on our cloak with very, very quick and just easily manageable passes with the airbrush. We're adding in some processed magenta from Dala Rain to really up the sort of vibrancy that you're going to get from this cloak, and we're sticking to the bigger, sort of more bold creases on that cape. Now let's get to the blue and yellow stripes. These are very iconic, extremely 1000 Suns. I wanted a bit of warmth to these stripes. We started off with some Ember Orange from P3. Now, as you can see, this paint is a little bit on the thin side and did require a couple of passes to get done. But we wanted to make sure that we had that warmth. And I still think this was probably the best choice to use for our base coat. For our blue, we used some Signal Blue highlight, and we mixed this quite heavily with Flow Improver as well, because we wanted our paint to be transparent. We've gone through the effort of putting down that pre-shade, and we must make sure that we take advantage of it. Otherwise, what was the point in doing it? By thinning this with the Flow Improver, same as we did with our Ember Orange, and applying this in a couple of thin layers over the miniature, we're going to get exactly what we want. Essentially, what you're looking for is to have full opacity in terms of there being no brush strokes, but a thin enough coat to allow the pre-highlight that we've put on the miniature to still show through and have an impact. Keep your paint thin and only apply as much as you actually need to get this done, otherwise you'll have gone too far and there's no point in doing it. Next, we took a tip from Marco at Not Just Mecha, and we started using some Vallejo Metal Color Chrome. Now, this paint is extremely thin. It was developed for an airbrush, and we used this, it's two parts, to one part each of the contrast Griffhound Orange and Ayandan Yellow. Now, by mixing these together, we're going to get a really nice sort of warm, rosy kind of gold colour, but to help it go in the mini, we're going to add in some gloss varnish. The final mix for all of this ended up at 2 parts of the metal, and then 1 part of each of the contrast paints and 1 part of that gloss varnish. Give that a really good mix up and make sure everything is incorporated there before getting it onto the mini. Now, when I was applying this, I found this was actually just a little bit too thin. It was going on there, but not everything was giving it the opacity that I kind of wanted. Now, I didn't know if this was just the way that I'd mixed the paints or whether it was something about the particular silver that I used, which is different from the tutorial that I saw, but I didn't really like the way this was going. So as a result, I took a thicker silver. Instead, we used Vallejo Model Air Metallic Silver, 2 parts of that, 1 part yellow, 1 part orange, and we completely missed out the gloss varnish. I found that this gave me something that still had the opacity that I wanted, but again had that really nice colour and hue to it. So by using this all over the Mini, I got something I was really happy with, and I think I need to do a little bit more experimentation over the next few months to try and work out how much of this technique I can use. We then put all of our washes down. We started off with some strong tone from Army Painter over all of our gold, making sure not to let that pool in the recesses, but importantly to let it just go past the gold itself and onto the blue or the yellow to create a nice strong border. For all of our blue, we used Drakenhof Nightshade thinned with just a little bit of water to help that flow off of the brush. And again, we made it into all these little areas to really get a nice border to all of our panels. There's a lot going on with a 1000 Sun Mini. You want to make sure you've got it absolutely right. For all of our blue highlighting though, we used a mixture of Signar Blue Highlight and Lothern Blue. We essentially used a 2-to-1 mix, thinned with a little bit of water to give ourselves something that we were really going to be happy with. By the end of all of our highlights though, I still decided I wanted a little bit more going on, so we added in some more Lothern Blue for a secondary highlight. Now, when doing these highlights, I thought it was extremely important to ensure that what we've got going down on the miniature is going to give us a nice sort of defined edge to everything that we've got going on. We kept our highlights reasonably minimal, but hit all of the important edges. So here you can see me applying the secondary highlight, got a little bit on the foot there, a little bit around the side of it, just to bring out that edge. Because a lot of this miniature is covered in gold trim, we also needed to make sure we didn't lose the effect of the panels that we had. So I put a second highlight just normally towards the very bottom or the very top of each of those elements to give us that little bit of extra brightness and vibrancy. We used more highlights as we got towards the top of the miniature, so in this headdress for instance, we made our highlights just a little bit bigger. This gives the effect of the top of the Mini being brighter than the bottom, which is kind of what you'd expect. For the yellow, we mixed in some Menoth White Highlight. Now this was added to our mix to give us a nice sense of brightness, but also retain the warmth in the miniature. If you add white to things, it doesn't work so well. You end up with something that's quite pastel. By adding in this colour instead, we end up with something that still retains that warmth and retains the vibrancy of what we're putting on the miniature without blowing out the colour. This is one of those paints that I use pretty much all the time. In fact, on this Mini, I think it was used in almost every process that wasn't painting metal. Here's me adding in some more of it now for a second brighter highlight. You can see this really does look very yellow now. There's a lot of paints that you might have in your collection that you use once or twice, but there are some that you use pretty much all the time, and for me, this is one of them. See if you can keep track of how many times we use it on this Mini. For the Scarab Beetles and things like that, we just painted them in a base coat of Meridius Blue from P3. I wanted to keep that nice sort of teal blue turquoisey look to things. And there's some more of that Menoth White Highlight coming in to highlight all of the areas on here. For these scarabs on the front, I wanted to create a little bit of a sort of upside down U shape on the top of the scarab. So we were highlighting both the edge, the middle line, and the top line of each of those elements. We then added some more of that in and basically carried on doing the same highlight step, but giving us a nice bright finish on all of that. By doing this, we get something that stands out quite well against the base color blue that we've got, really pops out against the purple, and of course just flows naturally through the Mini. It also, I feel, has that kind of Egyptian look to it. Essentially, this is the Mini base coated and done. So if you wanted, you could get this guy on the table ready to go if you were painting a regular 1000 Sun. Here, obviously, we've got a lot more detail to do. And for the next steps to really jazz it up and bring some extra punch to our Mini, we're highlighting the gold with Scale 75 Dwarven Gold. If you're someone that uses just GW paints, you may not have heard of this company at all, but honestly, this is like Retributor armor on steroids for me. It covers really, really well, has a beautiful yellow hue, and it's just a fantastic product. We then took some Morrow White, added that to any element of the flame, and both just the flames on the hand and also amped up the pre-highlight we did on all of these areas. In the next step, I'm going to show you how to paint these, but I wanted a much brighter under highlight for these areas. So let's talk about wet blending, and most of you will have heard of the term but not necessarily understand exactly what it means. Now I'm using 3 different contrast paints for this: Magus Purple, Volupus Pink, and Gryph-hound Orange. Some of these paints have got very weird names. As when doing any kind of a blend, prep your palette. Get everything set up, ready to go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take some Magus Purple, we're going to put on the bottom parts of all of our fire kind of effects on this guy. And wet blending literally means blending on the model 2 or more wet coats of paint. So we're then going to take some of that Volupus Pink, we're going to mix that in to our purple and paint the area we want to paint our purple and our pink. Next, we're going to take some orange. We're going to put that in over the top of that. And what wet blending does is it allows those paints that are wet to just mingle in between each other and give you a reasonably smooth blend. Now, it's not necessarily something you're going to get completely even the first time you do it. Frequently, you'll find, especially when working with transparent paint like these contrast paints, that you might need to do it a couple of times because you might find that there's not quite enough punch to them. Now, you don't need to use contrast to wet blend, but I have found when playing with contrast paints, it's a very powerful tool that painters have in their arsenal. On this miniature, we've used contrast paint a lot on all of the magical and demonic elements of the mini. We even used it earlier on that metal. And I found that when you're doing something like this, just a little bit of playing around because of the delayed drying times that you get with these paints can give you some really fantastic results with very little work that you actually need to put in. Just be patient, think about the point where one color is going to become another, make sure there's no pooling there to otherwise sort of interfere with your blend, and just have a practice and have a try. Honestly, you might be surprised at how little you've got to do to get something that looks pretty damn cool. So with our wet blending dry, it's time to start highlighting all of those pieces. We've got some Sunset Red, Naggaroth Night, Trollslayer Orange, and some Flashgitch Yellow, as well as, unpictured there, some more Meloth White highlight. We're starting with a mix of the purple and the pink, and we're brushing this up to the edges of the purple and beyond it to ensure that we get something that covers all of the areas that purple might have interacted with our wet blend. We're then adding in even more Sunset Red and bringing the volumes up to a nice brighter area. By doing this, we're going to keep getting that blend going all the way through. You also saw me there just applying it not to an edge, but further down into the area where both of these two colors mix together. Here we're applying it to the orange areas, and I know that I'm doing that, and I'm going to paint over it again with the orange later on. We're adding in more of that Meloth White highlight to areas that I know will end up being yellow by the time we finish all of this. But it does give a really nice bright pink to everything we've got without washing it out and making it too pastel. Again, this is a fantastic colour, and if you can find P3 colours, you should definitely give it a go. Here we've taken some of our Trollslayer Orange and some of that Sunset Red, and we've mixed those together to create a very warm orange and pink mix. We can put this on all of the hot spots in our orange to give us a little bit of that pink hue coming through and help the blends out, but also to set us up for the following mixes. We're adding in Flashgitch Yellow, and we'll do this a couple of times as we bring up the brightest highlights on all of this swirling magical energy. Essentially, when you're doing any technique like this where you've got a progressive blend, keep adding in one of your colours to get to a nice bright finish, and don't stop until you're happy with it. Sometimes you'll end up at a point where you've added in enough of that one colour and you can't really go any more because you're painting with a pure version of that. At times like that, you may want to add in a brighter off-white, but it's always best to try and keep the vibrancy and try and sort of just build everything a little bit slower perhaps with those bolder colours. I've found that when doing this, you end up with a really fun process to go down because you can just add as much or as little to it as you want. And I think the final result here on these flames looks really, really cool. To do the eyes on the staff, we added some Naggaroth Night as our base coat. I thinned this down and we applied a couple of coats to get a nice solid base coat. We then started mixing in some beaten purple from P3 and started to layer that up. Essentially, we're adding in some very thin paint towards the middle part of our eye, getting thinner and thinner as we go. What we want to do is create a nice smooth blend currently, but then as we get further through this, we started to stipple things a little bit. What I wanted was something that looked a little bit like an alien or demonic eye. So I figured that rather than having a really smooth texture from the outside to the inside, it would make more sense to get a little bit brighter, a little bit more mottled, as if there's like flecks of color in the eye itself. We keep doing that, we keep building these colors up using things like our sunset red, our Meneth white highlights, and so on. And you can see this stippling motion now as we get into the middle band of the eye. We've gone all the way out to the left and right extremes, and we're concentrating on getting like a nice band across the eyeball itself. We go brighter and brighter and brighter, and one of the things we'll do very shortly is create some speckles around the outside of this to help enhance that mottled effect. Now you can do as much or as little of this as you want. If you feel you've gone too far, just glaze some purples or some pinks over the top of it, then go back to this. Anything in painting can be done as a balancing act. You don't have to get it all the way right the first time. For the pupil, we've added some Thamar black to our palette, and we've just started roughly painting in a triangular cat's eye. I didn't want this to go all the way to the bottom of the eyelid. I did want it to go all the way to the top. Very reminiscent, I guess, of the Eye of Horus from a lot of the 40k lore. Once you've roughed it out, all you need to do then is just go back to it and keep tweaking it until you're happy. So I took some more thinned down Thamar black, kept working into it to get a nice large, wide pupil on our eye. Something I thought would look quite evil. For a highlight, we just added some Meneth white highlight to our black, put a little highlight on one side of the eye. I was reasonably happy with that. I didn't want to go too bright there, because in the next step, we took some Meneth white highlight on its own, and then with a quick dot and a line, just a nice separation between the two, gave what looks like quite a glassy 3D effect to that. We also used Meneth white highlight with all of the horns. We mixed it with some Incubi darkness and just used that as our highlight, adding in a little more each time to get us to something that's really quite bright. As we got to the final highlights, we kept it to the very top parts of the horns. That way it naturally gets brighter again as it goes further up the mini. For things like the base, we just did a quick workup with some Xandri dust, some Steel Legion drab, nothing crazy, based it with some pumice, more Xandri dust, and that was it. I'm going to leave you guys with the sexy B-roll, but thank you very much for watching the video and supporting the channel. I'd really like it if I could see you guys in the streams at some point in future. Between now and then, peace out everyone.